Welcome everyone to Catholic Sunday Scriptures in Context. This is a presentation of the Augustinian Order in St. Paul Parish, of which I am the pastor, the soul in the heart of the Italian market in South Philly. The 22nd Sunday of the year is August 27th, 28th, which also happens to be the feast of our two great patron saints, St. Monica on the 27th and our patron St. Augustine on the 28th. Monica was the mother of Augustine. Our first reading this weekend comes from the book of Sirach. My child, conduct your affairs with humility, and you will be loved more than a giver of gifts. Humble yourself the more, the greater you are, and you will find favor with God. What is too sublime for you, seek not. Into things beyond your strength, search not. The mind of a sage appreciates proverbs, and an attentive ear is the joy of the wise. Water quenches a flaming fire, and alms atone for sins. So what I highlighted here, and to help you understand in the way I laid it out, this reading is a series of couplets, not contiguous, as you will see in the numbers on the previous slide. But Jewish poetry was not about rhyming, but was about repeating the idea. So, seek not in the third verse there, and search not, repeat that idea. Sage, and repeat that idea with the word wise. So it was to reinforce the idea, and that's how Hebrew poetry worked. And the last one there, water quenches a flaming fire and alms atone for sins, is the beginning of a section on helping the poor. So this book of Sirach is not part of the Hebrew scriptures, nor is it in the Protestant Bible, because there was a time that they believed it was not originally written in Hebrew. Much later research, however, did find a Hebrew original, and which was translated into Greek in Alexandria at a later date. The book reflects Hebrew wisdom, and it was written in competition to the idea of Greek wisdom. And the author was trying to say that, if we go back to the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, we really find all that we need to know. We don't have to worry about Greek wisdom, which was based upon Greek philosophy, for example. The couplet style that is used here is typical of Hebrew poetry. The couplet did not reflect a rhyme, as I mentioned, as in English, repeated the concept in other words. And the message here in the selected verses is that God favors the humble and that humility will lead to wisdom. And as I mentioned, the last verse begins a section about caring for the poor and talks about almsgiving, which is dedicating some of your money to help the poor. Our second reading is a continuation of our reading of the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, you have not approached that which could be touched, and a blazing fire and gloomy darkness and storm and a trumpet blast, and a voice speaking words such that those who heard begged that no message be further addressed to them. No, you have approached Mount Zion, and the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, the countless angels in festal gathering, and the assembly of the firstborn enrolled in heaven, and God, the judge of all, and the spirits of the just made perfect, and Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and the sprinkled blood that speaks more eloquently than that of Abel. And the reason it's called the letter to the Hebrews, because it assumes that the person reading this knew well the Jewish faith. And so it was given that name, the letter to the Hebrews. And this passage is a great example of why that is the case. Any Jewish person reading blazing fire, gloomy darkness, storm, trumpet blast, voice speaking words, would immediately think of Mount Sinai and the Exodus experience that would need to be told to him. And what the author is doing is comparing that Old Testament moment when God revealed himself to the new mountain, the Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. And this is apocalyptic language. It's about the end time. And you will see angels in festal gathering versus, this gloomy darkness, the assembly of the firstborn enrolled in heaven, the martyrs that have gone before us, and the God who's judge of all, who is much more focused on justice rather than speaking these words that create fear and so forth. So the letter presupposes the knowledge of the Hebrew faith. The knowledge needed here is that of the appearances of God during the Exodus, a God of thunder and lightning versus a God of angels and peace. God is calm and compassionate instead of fearsome and threatening. It is Mount Zion, the Old Testament experience of God, to Zion, this new, yet to be realized experience with the resurrected Christ. And so this reading contrasts covenants, peoples, and rituals. Okay? Our gospel comes from the 14th chapter of Luke. On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He told a parable to those who had been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at table in the place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, "Give your place to this man," and then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the host who invited him, "When you hold a lunch or dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous." So it's interesting that this reading, he's at the house of a leading Pharisee. There were two political parties at the time. One was called the Pharisees and the other the Sadducees. And one of the major differences between them was belief in the resurrection. The Pharisees believed in the resurrection, and that's why in the last line of the reading, "You will be repaid in the resurrection of the righteous." It would appeal to the Pharisees to hear this. And so what's happening in the first part of this reading is Jesus is just giving some practical advice. It's not theological here, it's just common sense. And then in that second part, he says that we need to be attentive to the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. So this reading is really about humility. Jesus highlights how we focus too much on external appearances. And he says we'd be better off trying to be humble. Make your generosity sincere, not one-upsmanship, that you only invite those who can do you a favor, and then they in turn invite you again, and so forth, and try to outdo each other. But make your kindness, generosity sincere. One's status is ultimately determined by God, not by the guest of a house. And if you're humble, God will approve you. Seek God's approbation rather than the honor accorded by humans. And lastly, as we mentioned about this focus on resurrection. Continue to pray for peace in Ukraine. And if you think this might be helpful to someone, please pass it on. Thank you very much, and enjoy the feast of St. Augustine and his mother, Monica.